Photography for Noobs with me and Aaron. This is our video on phone photography.
Alright, so basically, if you want to do some photography, but you don't have the money for a DSLR, or you don't know if you like photography, you just want to try it, something's really nice nowadays. Everyone has smartphones. And these smartphones, for the most part, have really good cameras, if not decent cameras. Almost all iPhones have an exceptional camera. Most of the new Samsung line has a very good camera. And other phones also have cameras that perform quite fine, better than most point and shoots used to, and better than some DSLRs did a couple years ago. So, as you all know, the best camera is the one you have with you. It doesn't matter how expensive it is, but if you can capture the moment, that's usually good enough for most things, except for perhaps studio work, which doesn't really matter for the amateur. So if you want to capture a moment, the best camera to have is the one with you. And everyone has a smartphone with them with a camera. Now, when shooting with your phone camera, you have to remember a few things. Phone cameras, they don't have as good dynamic range. They don't handle noise as well, mostly because the image sensor is a lot smaller, so it has to ramp up everything to get enough light to take a good image. So when you're taking your shots, really worry about composition of them, because image quality can generally be forgiven if the composition is good enough. Right. To take a good photo with your phone, because you don't have the dynamic range, and generally the phone HDR isn't nearly as good as it should be to actually capture the full dynamic range of the image, it's best to use contrast to your advantage. That's why a lot of photos perform almost best when there's a nice, intense sunlight, and you set the exposure to the sun, so you get the nice, vibrant colors from the sun, and then the foreground goes to a silhouette, and it looks quite beautiful. We can put in a few examples of when that happens. Another good thing that your phone performs very well on is landscape shots, because they generally have quite a wide lens, and with that wide lens you can capture the full expanse of the nature. And the color reproduction on most phones is a little bit bumped up and oversaturated, which really yields itself well to nature shots. Another good example is for skiing, where there's lots of light, and in the mountains, where you can really just see out in the distance because of the phone's small, you can really see out in the distance. But I need to think what to say next. Good? Alright, yeah. So as I was saying, you can really use the lack of dynamic range to your advantage to add a lot of emotion and a very intense feel to your photos just by having the very dark blacks and everything in your photo. Another thing to be really mindful of when you're shooting with your phone is composition. Composition is the difference between a little snapshot and an actual masterpiece of a photo. And if you think about most famous photos, no one cares what camera is taken on. The photos itself is what people like. And your phone is in most cases perfectly capable of capturing it. Most phones have extremely high megapixel counts. So you can do plenty of post-processing. So when taking a photo with your phone, really be mindful of composition. The best way to get composition right is keeping everything symmetrical. That's, as a beginner, that's how you get something that looks pretty. If you keep everything symmetrical, or have very distinct blocked out sections of, let's say, building, sky, clouds. These types of ideas where you keep everything in sectors or symmetrical, and will really set the difference between a crappy cell phone picture and a really nice cell phone picture. So another really nice way of making your photos, or taking photos on your phone and making them look nice, is to use the very, very small aperture that most cell phone cameras have to your advantage. The small aperture is because you have a very small image sensor, so you can't lose any light by having an extremely tight aperture. They keep it as big as they can so they get as much light as they can, and then they sharpen after the photo's been taken to make it more sharp. Yeah. So what you can do is if you focus on something quite close up to your camera, you'll get very nice bokeh in the background just because of the fact that you have such a wide aperture. Lots of phones have f1.2 to f1.8 is the common. One of the smaller apertures are f2.4, which is still quite large. So you can really, if you get in close to your subject and focus on it, you'll get a nice background blurring, which really looks like it was taken on a much better camera than it really was. So, yeah. Cut.
It's too damp, Aaron.
Here.
We're going into a church?
No, you're here.
Okay.
So, as with most things, it's really not to do with the equipment you have, it's your skill that matters. So, for example, scrap that, restart. So, like with most things in photography, it's really not about the equipment you have, it's mostly about your skill. And so, the best thing you can do to get good photos on your phone is study a little bit about composition and framing. And then, always have it with you and be ready to use it. So, that was this episode of Photography for Noobs. Hopefully you enjoyed it. See you next time.